So here we are once again with the SEC causing millions of dollars worth of damage to retail investors. As you can see, $84 million in liquidations in the last 24 hours just on Bitcoin. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's roll that intro and start from the beginning. Okay, guys, so what we're going to do, we're going to break down what happened yesterday in a little bit more detail. As you have seen, we have a bit of an interesting series of events that have unfolded, resulting in a lot of liquidations and a lot of damages to retail investors, all at the hand of the SEC. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to jump on down and we're going to reflect on the timestamps that certain things happened and reflect on what happened regarding the price action, because it is not as easy or as simple as it may seem on Twitter, or X as it's now known, in comparison to the actual timeline of events happening in terms of the price action. So let's go ahead and get right down into this. So we're going to start things off right here, right? So on the 24th of October, 2023, Gary Gensler comes out and says, this is a reminder to secure your financial accounts as well as protect against identity theft and fraud. Remember to use strong passphrases or passwords, set up multi-factor authentication, keep account alerts turned on. Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And so the question I have here is this all just PR? Is it just throw out what people want to hear, what they need to see, and be seen to be doing the correct political things, but never actually living up to your own words? It's very interesting. Let's move on from here. Let's take a look at this tweet here. So this tweet is coming from the US Securities and Exchange Commission at SEC.gov. Today, the SEC grants approval for Bitcoin ETFs for listing on all registered national securities exchanges. The approved Bitcoin ETFs will be subject to ongoing surveillance and compliance measures to ensure continued investor protection. Now, what's interesting about this is the timestamp in which this was sent. It was 21-11, so 11 minutes past 9 in the evening. Now, when we reflect on this news breaking and, of course, the actual price chart, we end up with some really interesting things. So let's go ahead and bring up TradingView and take a look at that. Okay, so here we have TradingView. Now, I've brought this down to the minute chart so that we can be really, really accurate with what time everything unfolded. I'm going to draw a vertical line right here. This is 1 minute before the news actually broke. What I'll do is I'll also just come into the settings here and change the transparency of this to a nice big white line. But I will bring it down a little bit so you can see it a little bit clearer. So you can see if I zoom in right here, that the moment or 1 minute before the news broke, there was really no real major price action. The news broke and we saw a significant surge to the upside for Bitcoin. Okay, now from here we can see and we can note that this was a 2.61%. Again, we're on the 1 minute time frame, right? If we actually take it to the highest point, it was 2.7%. Okay, so we can see here some FOMO kicking in. Oh my God, the Bitcoin spot ETFs, they're all approved. Fantastic news. And of course, like all Twitter things, when it comes to these fundamental news, Twitter goes wild, spreads like wildfire. And the next thing you know, well, we've got this 2.7% move to the upside. But it isn't all as it seems. Let's go back to the tweet in question, right? This was 21:11, so 11 minutes past 9. From here, we can move on and we can see that Gary Gensler then actually put out a tweet saying that the SEC's Twitter account was compromised and an unauthorized tweet was posted. The SEC has not approved the listing and trading of spot Bitcoin exchange-traded products. This one was sent out at 26 minutes past 9 in the evening. So let's go back to our TradingView and take a look at what happened at 26 minutes past 9. So at 26 minutes past 9, let's go ahead and put another vertical line in. It happened right here. That means that there is a significance between what happened with the approval, or people believing that the Bitcoin spot ETFs were approved, and before it turned out to be fake news. And this tells us everything that we need to know about the behavior of participants when it comes to what is likely to happen when the actual news breaks. We saw a 6.72% move to the downside, and this was before it turned out to be fake news. So I know on Twitter and on some of these social media platforms, there's going to be that argument of, oh, we only dropped because it was fake news. Well, actually, if you break down the actual data points, we were dropping way before we found out it was fake news, at least in the world of Twitter. And so that brings into question, what were the behaviors of the participants here? Was it always going to be a sell the news event? Were we always going to see a pullback? And did the pullback only stop because Gary Gensler basically confirmed that it was fake news, right? These are the things that we need to really be thinking about and considering, rather than just thinking, oh my God, the SEC are awful. I mean, they are, obviously. But for the most part, we also need to really take stock of the situation of what unfolded and use this as a bit of a trial run. We know that there's going to be a bit of FOMO on the actual news of approvals or delays and stuff like this to a degree, right? But ultimately, I think if we were to see that news break properly, one way or another, rejection or approval, what we're likely to see is selling pressure and just basically continuation to the downside. And I do, of course, question that the larger institutional level investors, the market makers, and all the people who are really paying close attention to these things, or maybe are friends with Gary himself, are more and more likely to actually know ahead of time by a few moments. And their reactions are more important than that of just retail investor reactions, which is what I think is actually unfolding here on the chart. So if you take a look at this once again, we can see over the span of a few moments here that we have this 16-minute movement where we actually do see a 6.72% move to the downside after a 2.7% move to the upside. Okay, and this 16-minute span is telling us what we need to know about how the retail investors are likely to react when we actually do see approvals or rejection for Bitcoin. Ultimately, small push up, but collapse to the downside. And I suspect that is likely to be the case going forward as well. Now, it's not what people want to hear. We have to appreciate that. It's not necessarily the kind of news that we all want, but I think it is a inevitability that the market has to have a correction to the downside to a point where we can start to get momentum back, we'll start to get some funding back in so that we can move back to the upside. What is unclear at this stage, at least at the point of recording this video, is that it's unlikely that we're going to see Bitcoin spot ETFs this week now. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how the markets react, because they had such built up momentum towards this week. Are we now just going to stall out? Or are we just going to collapse down, right? And I've spoken about these things many, many times already in terms of the fundamental side. And maybe I'll discuss a little bit more later on today after I do a bit more research into what the SEC are likely to be doing and what they're planning to do next when it comes to the Bitcoin spot ETFs. So do watch out for that video later. But let's jump back to those tweets because they do find them interesting by the time we actually get to this one here. And this is basically 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗔𝗥𝗘, basically saying that they can confirm that the account that the SEC Gov was compromised, or the account was compromised, and they have completed their preliminary investigation. Based on the investigation, the compromise was not due to any breach of X's systems. So it wasn't a fault of Twitter, X, nothing to do with them, but rather due to an unidentified individual obtaining control over a phone number associated with the SEC Gov account through a third party. We can also confirm that the account did not have two-factor authentication enabled at the time the account was compromised, which brings me back to that first tweet from 2023, where Gary Gensler is basically all talk and no action. Again, we can see tweeting out these political statements of, cybersecurity month awareness or awareness month, fantastic, do these great things, but it doesn't actually give you anything of substance when they do not live up to their own words. We can see once again Gary Gensler failing time and time and time again, and at whose expense? The retail investor. So we can see and we can confirm that Gary Gensler is running a really poor or piss poor performing team over at the SEC, and all of them should be out on their asses without any jobs. That's my take on it. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below, but I think it is an absolute disgrace that this man is still in charge of the SEC. At this point, with so many damages created for retail investors, why the hell hasn't he been fired already? If you're looking for a little bit more about what we cover here on the channel, you should probably check out this video right here.